Hello everyone, Harkins here with a game review on Dark Souls 3. So, why is it called a Platinum review, Harkins? Well, I got the Platinum Trophy. That's right, the Platinum Trophy did every single trophy in the game. That means getting all the endings, finding all 113 rings, learning every sorcery, miracle, and pyromancy there is to learn and find, going through all the quest lines, getting all the spells and the rings and all that, going through each character's quest line, finding every secret, every nook and cranny, and it only took me 180 hours. Not too bad, huh? So I'm doing a review on this game because, well, it took up 180 hours of my life, and I don't usually dedicate that much time to a game. So this is definitely something special. So during this review, while I'm talking about the game, I'm not going to have any boss footage. I'm not going to have any really big on story spoilers going on, because I know how people are about these type of games. Like, they don't watch the trailers at all because it might reveal to them who they're going to fight and all this different stuff. I get that. So I'm only going to show, a few scenes of me running around killing things or just doing general PvP. So I'll save you guys the trouble of having to skip through or stop watching altogether because I'm showing a unique boss. But anyways, enough of the rambling of me getting the game. Let's talk a little bit about the game. The game's theme is very grim and dark. I noticed that right away with the opening cinematic. It was very gothic feeling. And I kind of like that lore nowadays. I mean, several years back, Fett and I got into Warhammer 40K. And that's very grim and dark. So I guess we're kind of looking for those type of games, but this is a little different. It isn't your typical medieval fantasy. There's sorcery, there's magic, there's knights, there's castles, there's dragons, but it adds a different mythical flair to it that just really makes it interesting. I mean, I heard about Dark Souls, those games in the past before. I mean, I'd watch PewDiePie play a little bit of Dark Souls 2 and wasn't too interested. It just didn't seem like my type of game. When Bloodborne came along, I thought, wow, that actually looks pretty cool. It was really fast paced, there was a lot of dodging, there was a lot of really huge challenges to overcome. And I thought, you know what? Games nowadays, you have Call of Duty, you have these different games where it literally just guides you through the entire game. A game that isn't even that difficult. And I feel like finishing a single player campaign is more of just something to do so that you're caught up with what happens in the story. Or even in multiplayer, you just ignore the single player of Call of Duty. You just go straight to the multiplayer. You just do other things because the other stuff isn't difficult. You want to fight people of your own skill or better. So I thought, well, Dark Souls and Bloodborne, those are pretty difficult games. Maybe I should get into those games. So I did something that I rarely do. I went out on day one of Dark Souls 3 being released, April 12th, and I went to GameStop and I bought it for 60 whole bucks. Didn't get the, expansion stuff. I'm gonna wait for that. But day one purchase, I never do that. Fett and I are really cheap with games. We like to get games that are, maybe several years old or just free to play. We usually wait for Steam sales, or I even got Dark Souls 1 on the Humble Bundle. I got the Humble Bundle. It was like $5. So we're really cheap, but I watched a little bit of the Game Grumps doing Bloodborne, and I thought, well, if it's going to be like Bloodborne and it's medieval fantasy, I'm going to like it. And wow, I had never been that addicted to a game since I don't even know. I don't even know what I was that addicted to in the past. I just pretty much played everything. Throughout the game, you earn, pick up items, different things like that. And in the descriptions, it gives you the story of how it got there, who's it belonged to, like what is it. And slowly you piece together who characters are, you piece together the story and what's going on. Obviously, this is the third installment in the Souls series, so I have no clue what was going on when I first started it, but I picked up right away on what was going on, to the point where if I were to play the other Souls games, I would already know some spoilers, because that is just how much it hands you the story of the other games through items or settings and such. So I kind of like games like that, where it doesn't exactly give you exposition in like a 20-minute cutscene telling you, so this happened and then this happened and you weren't a part of that, but this also happened and this is supposed to be interesting to you, you see. So I really like how you're really a part of the story, and it kind of immerses you into that lore. So it's got a really interesting story, and I really like that. It's got some really unique storytelling features. But what's the gameplay like? The gameplay is great. I mean, it has its flaws, obviously, so I've heard from people, and I myself have complained about some flaws, but every fighting style you can think of in the game. If you want to be a sorcerer, go ahead. If you want to be someone who dual wields daggers and throws knives and likes to use pyromancy while also being able to assassinate people and be invisible, yeah, that's in the game. You can wield a huge bastard sword. You can just wield ginormous weapons and just absolutely wreck people. You can be a knight, just have a shield and a long sword. Not very creative or original, but if it works, it works. You could be a spearman. You can use all sorts of weapons. There are so many weapons, so many shields, so many just unique weaponry that is in the game, and it really emphasizes different combat styles, and it makes PvP really interesting. So yeah, the game mechanics are pretty solid. I mean, people complain there's no poise. What poise is in Dark Souls is basically, if you have a lot of poise, it's very hard to stagger you in combat. And I'm sure you're familiar in other games about staggering. When you get hit, you're staggered. You can't do anything until you're not staggering anymore. So if you have a lot of poise, you can tank hits. You can continue with your attack animation and hit them even though they hit you earlier. This game doesn't really have that type of poise. I've experimented with it. At first I thought poise was how bad you staggered, which would make a lot more sense than just having, nothing at all. It turns out there is really no poise. That doesn't really make a difference. I don't know why they got rid of it. I guess because it's Bloodborne. So Bloodborne didn't really have poise. But the differences between this and Bloodborne, obviously this is very defensive, while Bloodborne was very offensive. I mean, I've seen a little bit of Bloodborne, and you don't have a shield or anything. You just go ham, and it looks like you're really rewarded for going ham. In this game, you're punished for going ham. If you go ham, you get too greedy. You get hit really hard. So it's definitely a way more defensive game, rolling, blocking, stuff like that, which is great for me. I'm a really defensive fighter. So who are you going to be fighting? Let's move on to the enemies and bosses. And I'll tell you one thing. I'm a huge fan of bosses in games. Shadow of the Colossus, all it was bosses, and I was totally fine with that. That was a great game and I loved it. But this game makes your average enemy difficult. I really like their approach to how you progress in the game. Each new enemy can give you a real hang up if you don't take them seriously. Just an average guy, maybe with a spear and a shield, if you keep making the same mistake of hitting his shield and then you're kind of staggered, he'll keep hitting you over and over until you die. You have to figure out, hey, if this guy's blocking, I can kick him and then I can critical hit him. That's how I get rid of him. And then you have to deal with him along with other guys next to him, and you just have to use these different strategies that you develop throughout the course of the game. And that goes with bosses too. I mean, this game expects you to die so many times that in the lore, you literally are undead, and when you die, you come back. That is how many times the game expects you to die. It literally is a plot point. Then again, that's not what the game's about. Sure, it's difficult, but I feel like it's not really about how difficult it is. Like, ooh, I died 1,000 times, it's a great game. No, it's more like, ooh, I died a couple times and I beat this guy, I'm so awesome. So it gives you like this huge satisfaction from winning that I just completely miss in games. I mean, I get frustrated in games when I die over and over again because it's like, that doesn't usually happen. In this, I actually welcome it. I welcome the chance to start over and face something with a new approach or a new weapon or a new strategy. I think that's just awesome, and the difficulty just enhances the story, and it really gives you a scale as to like, your quest might be impossible, and it really, that kind of adds to the grim and dark theme to the game. Like, there's a guy in your hub area and where you always go to level up and stuff, and he's always saying like, do we even stand a chance? Like, we're not even worthy enough to lick the boots of these guys we have to go out and kill. How can we possibly stand against them? And it's just, it really gives you this hopeless feeling, and it's kind of empowering to beat a really difficult boss. And then you look back and you look at all the bosses and areas you've beaten, and it really empowers you. And that's really awesome. But the bosses in the game, the bosses are their own storytelling points. Each boss has a bunch of lore. When you defeat the boss, you get their soul. You can read about them with their soul. You can transform their soul into a boss weapon, which is also really cool. Just so many different awesome things with the bosses, and each boss is difficult in their own way. I mean, highly choreographed moves for the most part, just really epic. And it really makes you feel like, wow, this is a force to be reckoned with right here. It's really cool and really awesome. So I'll move on to the settings now. I'll tell you a little bit of the areas you'll be going into. The settings are amazing. Right off the bat, you just start in a cemetery and you're just going around and you just see these gorgeous views and these awesome vistas. And then you move on to the next area, and it's all very medieval and very dark and grim, and it's just very awesome just looking at the huge scenes, the landscapes in front of you. And the best part is when you get further on in the game, you can look back and you can see those areas. Oh, I love that in games where the landscapes you've been to are still there. It isn't like, oh, you're in some enclosed area that's supposed to be different from the rest of the game as you progress. No, it's like, it feels like it's part of the same world. You can look back and you can see where you've been, or you can look forward and you can guess where you'll be next. It really, even though it can be a linear game, there's a ton of shortcuts, there's a ton of secret paths, there's a ton of places you can go. And there's huge amounts of verticality, just awesome level design, and just really cool architecture. It's something that you have to experience. This is really top-notch quality right here when it comes to game design and actually building a believable world. You feel really immersed when you get into these areas. Like most games you can think of where you get into a city, there's very few places you can go, and it doesn't feel very believable that you're in a city. But in Dark Souls, if you go into like a city, you go into a huge area full of so many buildings and castles and cathedrals. If you progress through it and you look back, it actually looks like you've gone through the entirety of the city. It's really believable in the fact that you can go a lot of places and traverse the lands. It gives it that open world feeling, even though it isn't open world at all. It's really awesome, and I'm really into exploration in games. I'm really into that. This really was something special. Going into each new area and being like, wow, this is awesome. And then the first enemy just kills me straight up. So it's like, oh no, this is going to be tough, isn't it? So anyways, the atmosphere and the soundtrack, it just, oh man, like a good game can be determined by the music. And I'll tell you one thing, that this is a good game on its own, but the soundtrack just emphasizes like, wow, this is a really awesome game. This really puts you in the mood for a boss fight or an area or just the tone of what's going on. The soundtrack, I'm a big fan of soundtracks in games, but this has to be the best game soundtrack I've ever heard. This is some really high quality stuff. I mean, From Software, the developers were just like, they seem very underfunded, you know? Like their first few games, they'd seem like, for the time, that was really low quality for other games that were coming out at the time. So it just seemed like they were very underfunded, like they didn't have enough money to do this. And you could see some corners being cut in Dark Souls 3. You look at a building from the wrong way, the wrong angle, where they didn't expect you to look, and it doesn't look good at all. And, you know, in the distance, you look across the landscape, you can see a duplicated village. You can see duplicated trees and assets and stuff. And obviously, they did that to save time, to save money. So they're still, it seems like they're a little underfunded. But obviously all the funds went into the freaking soundtrack because it's so good. But yeah, the soundtrack and the atmosphere, the ambience of what's going on, and just the settings and the tone, the hues of each area you go into, it immerses you into each area you go. Whether it's a swamp where you feel very hopeless and like it's a very huge drawn out area, like you feel like, oh, I have to go through all this. Or if you're going through a city and around every corner there could be a really tough enemy that can kill you straight out. It just adds so much immersion to the game. Obviously this wouldn't be a game for VR, but if this was a VR game, you would definitely feel very intimidated now that I think about it. But, I mean, a game's beginning is important as its ending, and the endings of this game, I won't go into detail, but they're definitely unique. And if you're into the story of Dark Souls, which some people actually go through the entire series not knowing what the heck's going on, which is kind of disappointing and kind of ignoring huge awesome points of the game, but I feel like the endings are really good. Like, now that I'm playing Dark Souls 1, now that I understand the entire series lore a bit more, those endings are such good concluding endings that it feels very satisfying. Like in each one, it isn't a huge like apocalyptic thing going on, you know, it isn't Michael Bay freaking Transformers blowing up the pyramids. It's it's really satisfying. Like some of them can be short and stuff like that, but it really gets to the point, and I feel like it really goes out with a bang. So if you're a Souls veteran and you haven't played it yet, I would totally recommend you'd get it. And if you aren't, I totally recommend you get this too, because this really borrows heavily on the other games. So if you're new, like I was, and never played any of the others and just went straight here, this is a really good place to start. This is a really good game. I mean, look at The Force Awakens. I mean, that borrowed heavily on A New Hope, right? But it doesn't mean that was a really bad movie because it borrowed from it. The same with this, when it borrowed from the other games. I feel like it just emphasized that it's coming full circle. It's all concluding, and it really gets back to the roots. And from someone who doesn't know the roots, that just gets into the game, you're just blown away because you haven't seen any of this before, and it just really is awesome. It's one of those experiences that you just have to try. And people are like, "Oh, this game, it's too difficult. I can't beat it." Well, then that's your problem. That isn't the game's problem. I was new. I'm new to this whole thing. I never did Bloodborne. I never did any of the Dark Souls. And yeah, it was difficult at first. But you know what I did? I learned from my mistakes, because this game is all about learning from your mistakes. When you die, you don't go in and do the same thing, because then you'll die again. And obviously people don't get that. They struggle with it because the game industry nowadays is like, "Oh, I see. You made this mistake here. Well, the game will be a little easier, or it'll be different. So when you do make the same mistake, it won't punish you for it. But this game punishes you for it." So that's a really good approach to game design that I really want to see more games doing. But anyways, going to be concluding this. We're getting a little bit up on time. So what I'd like to conclude with is, which system do I recommend you guys get this game for? I would say PC, because on PC you're running 60 frames per second. I guess, generally have better internet, I would hope, on a PC. But however, on PC you have hackers, and those hackers can get away with anything. And if those hackers hack you aren't going to get away with crap. You're going to get banned, and your account is going to get deleted. Do you really want to get it for PC to double the frame rate and have a risk of getting a hacker invading you and then killing you? And then suddenly you respawn, you have 500 million souls, and the game gives you a warning saying, "Remove your hacked stuff or you will be banned." And you can't, because you're the victim. You don't know how to remove that. You're not a hacker. And then you get banned. So what I'd recommend you do is have multiple save files. If you do want to get it for PC, have multiple save files. And so if you do get hacked, if you do have that hacker come in and do something to your character, then you can reload and you'll be fine. Otherwise, you're screwed. From Software did a horrible job with how to ban hackers in this game, and that's obviously something to take into perspective when reviewing a game like this. I mean, it's such a good game, and the fact that something like that has to ruin it for me, or anyone else out there that freaking gets their account deleted, all of their stuff gone, that's really a shame, and they really need to fix how they're dealing with that. So I really have to recommend the console. I have the game on PS4. It does suffer from frame rate, but then again, on PC, you can suffer from frame rate. It doesn't run in 60 frames per second, but it looks exactly the same. I'm telling you, it will look exactly the same as it does on PC. These games aren't hyper realistic with their graphics, but they use their graphics in such a way that it's very good looking to the eye from a distance or even up close to some things. So you aren't missing out graphic wise. It's going to look just as good on next gen as it does on PC. However, it will not run as smooth. I'm sorry, but if you want to deal with the risk of hackers, you can go on PC, but personally, I'll stick with the console. By the way, if you do go on PC, please use a controller. I tried Dark Souls 1 with a keyboard. Don't do it. The game's hard enough, okay? That's literally like a challenge run, trying to do the keyboard stuff. That's not gonna work. So anyways, my final verdict on the game, I have to give it a good score. Then again, the whole hacker stuff going on, I'm gonna have to decrease it, not because of the hackers, but how From Software is dealing with them and banning the victims instead of the hackers. So I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I would give it a 10 out of 10. This is a masterpiece. This is one of the best games. Is the best game. I keep saying one of the best games. It is the best game I have played in many, many years. So please, go out and get it. If you don't want to spend the full amount of money, I mean, I'm pretty certain it has dropped in price considerably. This isn't a big on AAA title, even though it acts like it is, and people all over like to play it. Go out and get it, preferably with the PS4 if you want the risk of hackers, PC. But wow, what a freaking game. And you know what? Even though I have the platinum trophy, I still want to beat it again and again. And each time you get to that credit scroll, it feels just as good as the first time you beat it. And I don't know what it is, but no game has ever done that before, where if you get a different ending and you get the credits, you really reflect and think, wow, what a journey. I mean, it took me 70 hours to beat the game first time. I got the supposed secret ending that everyone talks about, and I don't know what's so secret about it. You just do a few things in a row and do this and do that, and then you get the secret ending, and it's like, it's not really that secret. You just have to pay attention. So yeah, there's different endings to the game, and if you do different things, different quest lines, that's how you get it. So we're about a half hour now in, so I should probably wrap this up. I gave you my final verdict of 9 out of 10, and I highly recommend this. I mean, if you want to play it with a friend, you can do that too. You can summon in a friend as a phantom, and you can have fun that way. It is just such a ride. I mean, I did the game completely solo. You can, if a boss is too tough for you or an area is too tough, you can always take an easy way and summon more help. But I went through completely solo with everything, with the bosses and all that. And wow, what a ride. And you know, I beat the game 4 times now, and it's just as good. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much 10 out of 10 on console. On PC, 9 out of 10, because hackers and how they're being dealt with. So that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the footage. Hope you guys enjoyed my opinion, and really take that into consideration when thinking about getting this game, because this is a game that you should go out right now after watching this and buy it. Do it. Give these people your money. They need your money. They're obviously very underfunded. this is a good studio, and I really hope that they make more of these games in the future. Obviously, Dark Souls is finished, they've said so, but hopefully they make more games like this out there, because this was a ride. So thank you guys for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful. Leave a comment, leaving any criticism, any opinions. Where do you think my score was justified? And that's about it. We'll see you in the next one.